Right, looking over at the vol side of stuff in more detail, realized vol was pretty flat on the week on Bitcoin at around 37. Ethereum was lower by about 10 points down to 81. But as you can see, it's still almost, well, it's more than double Bitcoin realized vol. So a massive spread in realized between the two assets still. BTC front end vols were pretty flat on the week, but Ethereum was up about 5 points. Looking at carry numbers, we are back to a small positive or about positive 5 vols on Bitcoin carry, which means implied vols are higher than realized. But if we look over at Ethereum, we're looking at about a negative 8 vols of carry there with realized higher than implied. Looking at the OHLC charts, you can see Bitcoin pretty well behaved, getting smaller intraday ranges. We did see a little bit of excitement at the weekend there with some moves, but overall pretty well behaved within the implied ranges. And Ethereum testing those ranges a little bit more regularly, but not really managing to break out of them. But we are seeing a bit wider in terms of intraday moves there in Ethereum. Now, crypto markets, to me, they kind of appear to be waiting for the next catalyst to propel BTC to a new all-time high. You know, I do think vol's got plenty of room to move and plenty of room to react from here. And I do suspect if we do make a new high, it probably will suck in some call buying, and we will probably see, I don't know how long it will last, but we probably will see a bit of a bid to vol. You look here at the term structures, we've got short dated, sub 1 month stuff in the low 40s for Bitcoin. You look at the back end, it goes to about 50. So the whole curve is kind of residing in that 40 to 50 range. And then if we look at ETH, we had a bit of a pop in the front of 5 vols. So that front end trading at around 70 vol does go down a bit, but nothing too dramatically, right? So the curve settles in about 66 vol there in the back. But it is slightly inverted right now, Ethereum still, because it is winging around quite a lot. Looking at the time series, as usual, we did see some selling of the front end going into the steepest contango going into the weekend, and it has bounced out of that in Bitcoin. And Ethereum, you can see some of those wild swings really created a bit of a bid for the front, taking it up to about 80, but that has somewhat faded back to about 70 now as it trades. Looking at skew, cool skew, pretty much the whole week we were in cool skew for Bitcoin. Testing 0 a few times in the front end, but generally we're sitting at cool skew of in that 2 to 3 vol range for Bitcoin skew. Ethereum was in puts for the front end, has flipped to about neutral to slightly positive, and then the back end still staying in positive. So nothing too dramatic within the skew side. The range that skew has been trading in has somewhat tightened, I would say. But in general, we are seeing a bit of a move towards the upside and towards call premium. See it on here, the kind of the richest part of the curve on skew is June expiry for Bitcoin, trading above 3.5 vols, but the whole curve's kind of trading at about 2.5-ish. And then in Ethereum here, we were in -1, therefore we were in put skew in the front. That's popped to about 1 vol for calls, but the whole back end is quite well bid. As we get to July and onwards, we're seeing about a 3 vol call bid across the curve there. The fact that we've seen generally call spread buying on Ethereum as a way to buy Ethereum means that this call skew hasn't gone ballistic, as even though we saw such a sharp move of 50% or so in a matter of days on Ethereum, you would have thought that the skew would go to like 5-10 vols easily. But the fact that it hasn't is primarily due to the fact that a lot of the flows that have come in to buy Ethereum have come in to buy call spreads. And the reason why they're buying call spreads because the absolute level of vol is just too damn expensive to want to buy outright calls. So when you're looking at the money vol at 70 odd, you'd rather buy a call spread than buy an outright call, right? And so the fact that they're doing the spreads is was keeping a lid on the skew. And the reason they're doing the spreads is because the absolute levels of vol are quite expensive on Ethereum, okay? Whereas Bitcoin, if Bitcoin breaks the highs and it brings in some buying, there's no real reason to buy call spreads on Bitcoin when the outright vol's at like 40 something. You're just going to go in and buy outright calls. So that's why I believe there is room for Bitcoin vol to spike if we break higher. It's just that right now we haven't made new highs yet, so it hasn't felt the need to really rush in and see that buying flow. Okay. And then looking at relative value, ETH Bitcoin, as I said, kind of settling at around 0.024, retracing some of that spike, but still staying quite firm Although the broader downtrend that has been in since last June in 2024, that broader downtrend is yet to be broken. So it's still not conclusive that it's game on for Ethereum and you really start to see a lot of outperformance. Front end vol spreads are back at 30 vols. They've kind of been stable around there for a while. Did get a little bit cheaper, as you can see, a week ago, but they're at 30 vols. But remember, realize there's a 44 vol spread Ethereum over. So 30 vols actually is very justified given how things are moving. Back end spread actually catching a little bit of bid. I had said that I would have been a better seller of that at around 15 for the long term, but that is actually starting to grind a bit higher to about 16, 17 in the back as this stuff is just realizing so spectacularly well. I also think it's because some of the selling of vol is more concentrated on Bitcoin right now because it's the more stable asset. So people are more comfortable selling the more stable asset. And then looking at Ethereum skew, it is leaning more towards the put side still in the front end relative to Bitcoin. But as you go through July, you can see you've got a call premium that resides on Ethereum across the back of the curve there, which is basically saying that people are thinking this catch-up trade in Ethereum is still very doable, but it's probably a later on, sort of late in the summer type story, basically, right? It's not necessarily going to happen in the next month. That seems to be what the skew curve is telling us. All right, guys, that is it for today's one and my quick crypto vol update. Cheers.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. Remember, this is just a little taster of what we do at Options Insight. To get access to all our research, including my in-depth vol market insights and a whole lot more, you can sign up at options-insight.com. I'll see you soon.